I'm going to give you the punchline straight up here from the beginning. This is what I want you to hear today. I want you to hear, I think, 4 phrases. The first one is get up. The second one is go. The third is to look. And the fourth, listen. Get up, go, look, and listen. Will you pray with me? Gracious and loving God, may the words of my mouth, meditation of our hearts, be acceptable to you. You are our strength. You provide us with comfort. In all these things we pray. We give thanks. We listen. Amen. Last week we began a series on the Apostle Paul. His story seems kind of like one of those rags to riches stories. Some could say that this whole idea, the story of Saul to Paul, is really the Christian version of the story Cinderella. But it's from a spiritual perspective. I don't think there's any, stepsisters or mothers in there, but you might kind of say that there is some sort of notion of something holy or transforming that Paul, as his name would be also known as, would experience in his life and in this moment. You see, Saul is Paul's Jewish name. He wasn't a popular person among the people of his day, and those people specifically who were following after the way of Jesus. You see, people were still devout within the Jewish tradition, but they added this little bit that Jesus had offered. This whole notion that following the rules and the laws of the Hebrew Scriptures could be all compacted down to the notion of love. That in love and in all things there, you would not do all the things that the Ten Commandments tell you not to do or don't do, because you love. If you go to some of the other laws and rules, what you can eat, what you can't do, and how you should live, if it all comes down to love, that's what Jesus brought it down to. And these people were still honoring the Jewish kosher and traditional laws, but they were doing it so within the lenses of what Jesus had brought that day. Now, it's interesting when we read about Saul, or if we're reading about Paul, it seems like we have a couple different stories that we're reading here. We almost want to scratch our head and say, well, which Paul are we talking about? And who is this Saul in the first place? Well, it seems as we read out of the book of Acts, maybe we're reading a biography of Paul today. We're reading this biography, and second, when we start to read some of the letters in the New Testament, we begin reading more of a first-hand experience by Paul himself. Paul wrote somewhat, or at least it's attributed to Paul, that he wrote some 1/4 of the New Testament. A lot of what we Christians base our faith on is based on this one guy, Paul, who at one point went around persecuting Christians, people who started to follow Jesus in the way. And then he has this moment here that brings him to a very lighted path himself, in which he too would become one who's persecuted himself. Now, some of these writings that Paul would write, particularly within his letters, are not without controversy. And they themselves target groups, making us scratch our heads. Who is this Paul? Is this the same Paul that had this blinding moment? Is this a different Paul who was going from different areas in the Roman region, starting in churches? Or is this yet maybe a bunch of other Pauls just writing under the name of Paul? So some of the controversial things we begin to read is it seems that Paul or Pauls, whoever side we're taking at this point, seems to start targeting people from time to time, whether they be women, Jews, slaves, or homosexuals. We're just not quite sure which side of Paul we're reading. It seems that much of what Paul says and is attributed here comes across sounding more than just like one person. And this is probably the case. You see, for example, we read of Paul's conversion in the book of Acts, as we've read over the last 2 Sundays. And we're more likely to get some of the information of the writer of Acts by understanding the gospel writer of Luke. Many of those letters that, as I've said, can be attributed to his style, to his connection, and to those who were writing in his name. Therefore, as we talk about the various faces of Paul, whether it be as persecutor, proclaimer, pastor, or prisoner, we too might find ourselves in our faith journey connecting to the various persons or faces of Paul himself. We too might see a mirror being held up to us in the character of Paul, sometimes as persecutor, sometimes as a proclaimer of a good news message, maybe other times in that caring and pastoral nature or spirit that people of faith would be attributed to, and then oftentimes having to stand up for what you believe. I think we can identify with all these different aspects or faces of Paul, which remind us then that we too are all like Paul. We all have this message of God's transforming love and work in our lives, and we are called to proclaim that message. So what is this experience that Saul has that changes his very life? Saul, before he was Paul, or he was probably known, depending what circle he was in that day, or where he went for his afternoon lunch, or who he caught up with in the morning, knowing him as Saul or Paul, was on the ladder to something pretty good. He had his career in mind. We believe that he was wanting to maybe be part of the Sanhedrin, which is the Jewish ruling council. He was a young person. He went to schools of a Roman nature. He was well educated, and he knew his Jewish tradition. He was on his way to becoming something and somebody within Judaism. But everything he believed, everything he stood up for, everything that he went out and persecuted for, seemed to end by a flash of light and a voice. A flash of light that probably knocks him off of his horse, and he hears this voice and this incident that occurs before him as he is blinded by this light. Last week we talked about this blinder, that maybe it's something he had put there himself. And then all he kept doing was stumbling in his ways of trying to persecute someone, that he was persecuting himself. He hears this incident to get up, to go to a place called Straight Street, and to listen. To listen. With the help of his friends, they take him to this place down the Damascus Road, and he stays in this inn for some 3 days. I love code language in the Bible. 3 days makes us think of another 3 days. Jesus and the resurrection. Paul enters this tomb, this dark night of his own soul, to do some soul searching himself, in which he doesn't eat or drink. He's a good Jewish follower, and probably was believing at the time that he had lost all favor with God because God struck him blind. He was no longer a righteous man. And in order to become a righteous man, you got to fast, you got to pray, and you got to listen. And so he listens. And in that, he has a vision that a man named Ananias is going to come to him. He very well may have had papers in his tunic pocket there with Ananias' name as a list of people wanted. Those who were following the way of this new experience that was happening amongst the Jewish tradition. And at the same time, we might want to then flash them to Ananias himself, who's having the same vision, very similar to what Saul had, except for this is a one of proclamation. Ananias hears the word of God, or the voice of God, say to him, you need to get up and go to Straight Street. There's this guy there that's been praying for 3 days. He's expecting you. And by the name his name is Saul. And would you go there and say a prayer with him and maybe tell him a little bit about what you've been experiencing? I love this exchange that happens between Ananias and with God. You've got to be kidding me. Haven't you heard what this guy does to your people? He's persecuting them, and you want me to go into the lion's mouth itself, into that den, and to be swallowed up by all of this? And the voice of God says to him, get up, go, and look. You'll find someone who is waiting to listen to you. So he goes there, and out of that experience, he says a prayer with Paul. Paul receives his sight again, and the story continues. If we were to read further into that chapter, that Saul becomes Paul. He has this conversion experience in which he experiences the love of God in his life. He gets up on his feet before the people in the synagogue, and he claims out in his own voice that Jesus is the Son of God. The very person that I have been persecuting for is my Lord and my God. You can imagine, the advertisement that went up during that time, the marquee in front of the synagogues. Tonight, you knew him as Saul. Paul is here. I'm sure for the first couple nights there, the seats were pretty quiet. And then word started to get out about the transformation that had taken place in his life. And maybe Ananias, he was saying, this guy's legit. This is the real thing. Come, look, and listen for yourself and hear what he has to say. You see, as God has called Saul off of the Damascus road, it's a call of conversion and commissioning. Get up, go and listen. Listen to what's around you. And then it's also a call, a proclamation that's given to Ananias to get up, to go, and to look. The very proclamation that Paul would take on himself to look and to see where the needs are of their own community and to proclaim a good news message. They would say that Paul maybe became a renegade to some extent there, that he turned his back on what he was doing for the Jewish temple in Jerusalem. He was no longer dragging, these Christian Jews back to Jerusalem, kicking and screaming to be stoned to death or to even be imprisoned at that. He was now one of them. He was a renegade. He became a deserter of not so much the Jewish faith, but of a way that would say, this is how you do it. He learned a couple new words. He learned to look, and he learned to listen. And in looking and in listening, he found out that when we become renegades, we're not so much deserters. But a renegade is not someone who turns their back on what's behind them, but looks forward, what's ahead of them, and adds to that. I'm always taken by individuals who might have been raised in the Christian faith, and then they say, yeah, but you know what? I like reading what's happening in the Islamic tradition when they start talking about peace. And then I like reading a little bit of the Kabbalah, and there just seems to be God or some spirit floating in the midst of this. I can't explain this, but I'm just going to sit here for a bit and listen. And I'm going to look. And I think that's what Paul experienced. That in the looking and the listening, he truly found a Jesus in him as a Jesus that was present in himself and in others. There's a popular band out now on just regular pop station radio. Their names are Ex-Ambassadors, and I'm impressed by one of their musicians. It's their keyboard player. The guy's blind. I mean, I can barely play a piano with my eyes open, let alone with my eyes closed. And I'm impressed by just how they come together as a team, as a band, and they create music and they tell stories, and they remind people that no matter where you are in life, you can overcome those odds. One of their songs is called Renegades, and they use language like breaking the rules and trying to turn the other way, but really maybe part of that's because they're gaining a new way. Part of the story behind this song has to do with people with disabilities, people who might be blind or missing a few limbs or maybe they have to use other devices in order to function in life. And one of the individuals who has a disability is being interviewed as the song is starting. And the person just says, we just have to look at life a little differently. I may be blind. I may need crutches to walk up this mountain. I may need ropes to get me to the tallest peak. But if you think about it, we're just looking at it a little bit differently. But we're getting there. So all hail to the underdogs in all of us, that we too might experience that proclamation, that message of hope within our lives. I want to share this song with you by the band called Ex-Ambassadors. It's called Renegades. Run away with me, lost souls of revelry. Run wild, run free, 2 kids, you and me. And I said, hey, 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 living like we're renegades. Hey, 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 living like we're renegades, renegades. Long live the pioneers, rebels and mutineers. Go forth and have no fear. Come close, the end is near. And I said, hey, 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 living like we're renegades. Hey, 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 living like we're renegades, renegades. All hail to the underdogs, all hail to the new kids, all hail to the outlaws, Spielbergs and Kubricks. It's a time to make a move, it's a time to make amends, it's a time to break the rules. Let's begin. And I said, hey, 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 living like we're renegades. Hey, 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 living like we're renegades, renegades, renegades. In Saul's blindness, in that time of his blindness when he's trying to discover this world that's before him, he's listening, he's going, he's just sitting around and doing as he's told. And it's through the eyes of persecution. It's through those eyes and through that call that he hears a proclamation. A proclamation that allows him to see with new eyes. So how will you look through your blindness? How will you look through your darkened days? How will you look through the light of transformation? Through that light that allows you to proclaim your good news story before the world. And so that's what I challenge you with today. To discover those words for yourself, that Jesus is Son, the Son of God. How do you proclaim that message? I've told you stories about the Rennicks over the last year and some change. But you have stories too. We have a proclamation as First Church of Mesa. And truly that proclamation is the light of God's love in us as we live out Jesus Christ. Thanks be to God. Let the church sing. Amen. Amen.